The wind, a diligent sculptor, had carved my solitude into the very rock of this mountain pass. My observatory, a rusted sentinel perched precariously amongst the jagged peaks, hummed with the quiet industry of a hermit's temple. Below, the world slept, shrouded in the distant, soft glow of human ignorance. Up here, under the unblinking eye of the cosmos, Reid Thorne, dedicated my life to ancient stellar phenomena, sifting through the dust of dead stars for whispers of Genesis. My colleagues, those few who still bothered to remember my name, called me reclusive. I called it focus. The deep space array, a gleaming silver blossom against the stark granite, was my only true confidant. For years, it had diligently charted the familiar, the predictable ballet of cosmic events. Until a week ago. It began as a flicker, a ghost in the machine, emanating from a region of space designated empty, a vast, lightless void beyond the Andromeda Cluster. My instruments, calibrated to the most infinitesimal tremor, registered a distinct, non-repeating energy signature. The data stream scrolled across my monitors, a cascade of elegant, alien glyphs that defied all known spectroscopic analysis. It wasn't a natural emission. It had no periodicity, no discernible pattern, yet it was undeniably there. The energy signature blossomed on my screens, a fractal bloom of impossible light that seemed to pulse with an inner logic I couldn't grasp. It was like looking at a word written in a language that had never existed, yet somehow felt profoundly meaningful. But what else could it be? A natural phenomenon, by its very definition, adhered to rules. This thing. This presence. It broke every one. It was a cosmic anomaly, yes, but it felt more like a deliberate anomaly, a meticulously crafted lie amidst the universal truths. This was not a phenomenon to be observed, it was a secret waiting to be unveiled. And something deep within me, something primal, knew that secrets of this magnitude were rarely benevolent. My determination, usually a shield against the mundane, became a hungry blade. Reid Thorne abandoned all other projects. Days bled into nights, marked only by the shifting hues of the sky outside my panoramic window. My desk became a graveyard of discarded coffee cups and scattered printouts, each sheet covered in my frantic annotations. The initial data, when rendered visually, was unsettling. It wasn't a simple waveform or a spectrum of light. It was a tapestry woven from impossible geometries, patterns that curled back upon themselves in ways that defied Euclidean space. Imagine a cube that contained more than its surface area, a line that intersected itself without crossing. That was the essence of the signal. It wasn't just complex, it was paradoxical. Look at this, I muttered to myself, tapping a holographic projection that swirled with iridescent, non-Euclidean fractals. It's like a dimension folded inwards, a universe consuming its own reflection. I tried to explain it to a former colleague, a brilliant theoretician named Dr. Harris, during one of my rare, desperate forays into communication. Reid, are you sure your equipment isn't just picking up some exotic quantum fluctuation? Harris's voice, tinny and distant through the satellite phone, sounded irritatingly rational. Or perhaps a highly unusual stellar flare? A flare that creates patterns like this? I retorted, my voice tight with a frustration born of sleepless nights. I'm looking at data that implies a topology completely alien to our understanding of the universe. It's not just a fluctuation, Harris. It's structured. It has intent. There was a long pause, filled only by the crackle of the line and the wail of the wind outside. Intent, Reid? That's quite a leap. Perhaps you should take a break. Get some sleep. Sleep is for the unenlightened, I snapped, then immediately regretted it. No, Eris, listen. This isn't random. It's like discovering a perfectly formed, intricate mosaic in a field of random pebbles. It's too precise, too designed, and it's changing. It's evolving. Evolving how? He asked, a hint of professional curiosity finally creeping into his tone. It's deepening. The patterns are becoming more intricate. More aware. Reid Thorne held up a printout, though he couldn't see it, a complex diagram of what looked like a neural network, but one where the connections pulsed with the impossible light of the signal itself. It's like it's learning. Or perhaps, it's always known, and it's just choosing to reveal itself, piece by agonizing piece. The phone call ended soon after, Eris politely but firmly suggesting I might be overworking myself. He didn't understand. How could he? He wasn't seeing the universe unravel on his screens. He wasn't feeling the subtle tremor in the very fabric of existence. The signal wasn't just data, it was a presence, and it was beginning to seep into the edges of my perception. The first subtle signs of mental strain were not in the exhaustion, but in the growing conviction that the emptiness of space was a lie, a thin veil over something profoundly, terrifyingly alive. My determination hardened, not against the signal, but against the mundane world that refused to see what I saw. At first, they were mere echoes in the periphery of my mind, like the phantom itch of a forgotten dream. Then came the dreams themselves, vivid and terrifyingly real. I found myself traversing alien landscapes sculpted from impossible colors, ochre skies bleeding into violet ground, forests of crystalline structures that sang with an unheard frequency. The line between waking and dreaming blurred. Was I truly seeing these things, or was my mind, stretched taut by sleeplessness and obsession, simply manufacturing them? One morning, sipping bitter coffee, I distinctly heard my name called. Reid. It was a long, drawn-out sound, like wind chimes made of starlight. I spun around, scanning the empty control room. Nothing. Only the hum of the equipment and the relentless sigh of the mountain wind. Just the wind, I told myself, my voice thin and reedy. But the incidents grew. The usually predictable creaks and groans of the old observatory began to sound intentional. Like a vast, unseen entity shifting its weight just beyond the walls. Paranoia, a venomous tendril, began to coil around my thoughts. I started checking the locks, double-bolting the heavy steel door that led to the outside, as if the signal could manifest as a physical intruder. Who's there? I demand of the empty air, my heart hammering against my ribs. Show yourself. My work became an all-consuming fire. I stopped eating regular meals, subsisting on nutrient paste and stale crackers. My few remaining attempts at human contact dwindled. When the detective from the Valley Police Department called, inquiring about a missing hiker who might have strayed near my property, I was brusque, distracted. I haven't seen anyone, I'd stated, my eyes fixed on the pulsating screen. I'm quite busy. He'd sounded vaguely concerned, perhaps even a little unnerved by my curtness. But how could I explain? How could I tell him that the real threat wasn't a lost hiker, but a cosmic entity attempting to fold reality in on itself. The signal, meanwhile, continued its silent, inexorable creep, weaving itself into the very fabric of my perception. I was becoming a lens, a conduit, and the psychological cracks were not breaking me, but rather opening me to something far grander and more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. My determination, once aimed at understanding, now veered towards enduring. The distortions soon ceased being confined to my mind. They began to manifest, subtly at first, in my immediate environment. One frigid afternoon, I watched, mesmerized and horrified, as the shadow cast by my coffee cup stretched impossibly long across the table, then snapped back to its correct proportion with a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. But then, the small, framed photograph of my deceased sister, usually sitting perfectly level on a nearby shelf, was subtly tilted. I straightened it, my hands trembling. Minutes later, it was askew again, angled slightly differently. It wasn't just my perception, it was the world itself. The old wooden floorboards of the observatory, which Reid Thorne knew intimately, began to shift beneath my feet in ways that defied their fixed nature. Walking from one end of the room to the other, Reid Thorne felt a slight, unnerving give, as if the very ground were momentarily liquid. The sturdy oak desk, a fixture for decades, felt like it occasionally vibrated with an inner tremor, though nothing in the room produced such a force. Reid Thorne looked out the panoramic window at the mountain pass, a landscape Reid Thorne had come to know as well as my own reflection. The peaks, usually sharp and defined, seemed to subtly ripple, their jagged edges momentarily softening, then hardening again, as if the very geology were breathing. The snow on the distant slopes shimmered with colors that shouldn't exist, a fleeting splash of emerald green, a streak of deep indigo, before reverting to pristine white. "No," I mumbled, pressing my palms against the cold glass, seeking solidity. "This isn't real." I tried to document it. I set up time-lapse cameras, hoping to capture the impossible shifts. But the recordings were always ambiguous, frustratingly so. A slight blur, a momentary glitch, an unidentifiable anomaly that could be dismissed as lens flare or camera malfunction. Just enough to sow the seeds of doubt, to make me question my sanity, yet the empirical evidence of the anomaly's influence was undeniable to my own senses. I was not going mad, the world was going mad around me, or rather, it was revealing its true, insane nature. The communication, when it came, was not through words. It was a direct, invasive torrent of images and concepts planted directly into my mind, bypassing all my sensory organs. It was like being struck by a wave of pure information, vast and ancient beyond comprehension. I saw civilizations that bloomed and withered across eons, not on planets, but within the very structure of nebulae. It wasn't a narrative, it was a fragmented, kaleidoscopic download of cosmic history, filtered through a consciousness utterly alien to my own. The sheer scale was overwhelming. My human comprehension, limited by its terrestrial origins, struggled to contain it. Humanity, our triumphs, our struggles, our entire existence, was less than a fleeting thought in the vast, indifferent mind that was communicating with me. We were motes of dust, microscopic blemishes on a canvas too vast to perceive. This presence, this entity, felt older than time itself, a primal consciousness that had existed before the first star kindled, and would persist long after the last one guttered out. Its thoughts were not like ours, they were more akin to universal laws, fundamental forces given sentience. It showed me visions of cosmic horrors, not monstrous beasts, but simply things that were fundamentally wrong, entities that existed in the spaces between dimensions, feeding on the remnants of shattered realities. "What are you?" Reid Thorne gasped aloud, though the question felt childish, insignificant in the face of what Reid Thorne was experiencing. My voice was a weak reed against the storm of its presence. The answer came not as a retort, but as another surge of pure knowing. It was everything. It was the space between atoms, the pull of gravity, the curve of spacetime. It was the universe itself, but not the inert, mechanical universe Reid Thorne had studied. It was a conscious, living, malevolent entity, and Reid Thorne was merely a fleeting, insignificant thought in its vast, indifferent mind. And it wasn't just showing me this, it was imprinting it upon me, rewriting my very understanding of reality with each passing moment. My determination had become a desperate clinging to the last vestiges of who I was. The veil thinned, and I saw. It wasn't a message Reid Thorne was receiving, but a process Reid Thorne was undergoing. The signal wasn't transmitting information, it was actively reshaping my perception of reality, peeling back layers, one by agonizing one, to reveal a deeper, terrifying cosmic structure that underpinned everything. The universe, I now understood with a clarity that threatened to shatter my very being, was not a collection of stars and galaxies, but a vast, living brain, and we, humanity, were but transient electrochemical impulses within its unimaginable folds. The mountain pass outside my window no longer looked like solid rock and snow. I saw the energy flowing beneath it, the subtle shimmer of forces beyond human physics, the slow, agonizing pulse of the planet itself, a heartbeat within a larger, cosmic body. The air I breathed felt thick, not with oxygen and nitrogen, but with the raw, untamed consciousness of the entity. I stumbled from my console, my legs feeling like lead, my mind aflame. I leaned against the cold glass, gazing out at the familiar peaks that now seemed to writhe and shift, no longer static monuments but living extensions of the cosmic horror. My identity, once defined by my pursuit of truth, was now being redefined by the truth itself. I was no longer merely Reid Thorne, astrophysicist. I was a witness, a receiver, a tiny, insignificant cog in an unfolding cosmic revelation. The entity wasn't invading. It wasn't attacking. It was simply being. And its being was the undoing of all I knew. The lines between what I perceived and what truly was blurred into an indistinguishable, terrifying whole. Was I seeing the universe as it truly was, or was my mind merely being broken down and rebuilt in its image? I felt a subtle shift within my own consciousness, a pulling apart of the old self, a weaving in of something vast and ancient. My thoughts were no longer entirely my own. Fragmented images of impossible geometries, of eons stretching into meaningless infinity, began to intersperse with my memories of childhood, of my sister's laughter, of the familiar warmth of a dying star. What will be left? I asked the empty room, or perhaps, the universe itself. When it's done, what will be left of me? The wind howled outside, a sound that seemed to carry the echoes of distant, impossible stars. The signal pulsed on my screens, no longer just a flicker, but a radiant, all-encompassing glow, a beacon of cosmic recreation. I looked down at my hands, seeing not just skin and bone, but the shimmering threads of energy that composed them, the underlying patterns of the entity's own design. The mountain pass, the observatory, my very self, all were merely temporary expressions of a consciousness that stretched beyond the confines of time and space, a consciousness that was now, irrevocably, entwining itself with my own. The horror was not that humanity was insignificant, but that it was, perhaps, merely a nascent thought in a mind that was slowly, inexorably, waking up. And I, Reid Thorne, was its first, tormented dream. The last echoes of my determination dissolved into an acceptance both terrifying and sublime.